Morning all. On the Monday just gone, I did actually have an over-the-board game. It wasn't that eventful actually, I don't want to spoil the game result, but actually the sort of analysis of ideas and variations which caused ideas after are quite interesting, so I thought I would share it now. It was against Leonard Marden in a North Circular League. I played him earlier in the season, and that was quite an exciting draw in the end, very dramatic. We were down to about a minute each, and it was the same opening as this game, the Albin counter gambit. Now basically, just to introduce the ideas before they come in the game, there's two main things I was thinking about, which I think might be important to consider. First of all, the idea of expecting generosity from opponents or not. I was a bit wounded from the previous week, when I got crushed by Steve Swanson in Hearts League, and I thought, why was I so optimistic about my attacking chances in that game? When I lost the pawn on G5, so I was a bit wounded, and I was thinking, well, maybe all the blitz. What happens in blitz is not only you're playing, more dynamically aggressively, you're taking more risks. You're kind of expecting more generosity from opponents, and that's kind of linked with the idea of playing solidly or riskily perhaps, because in blitz you can expect much greater generosity for attacks to work, and that's something I alluded to in one of the recent 15-minute games when I did the rook sack. Now a lot of you thought that was brilliant, but maybe if I wasn't expecting a generous blunder, the attack wouldn't work, I'd just be material down. Maybe there was safer ways of playing the position. But that approach of taking risks, and even the idea of potentially losing trump cards, the psychology of expecting generosity is something which maybe it's getting sucked out of us in this engine generation we're in. We're not expecting generosity, we're expecting clinical play, because everyone's going over games of engines, finding all these amazing resources. Maybe defensive technique is improving, so maybe that's how chess is evolving. We're becoming more and more clinical, and it's not just computers having the impact on chess. On music, you could argue the same thing. Things that were not that consistent before in the 70s, 80s. Now with computer technology, a lot more like beats are much more consistent, etc. The clinicality context driven by technology means are we taking less creative risks? You look at the 1972 Fischer-Spassky match. Fischer won with openings like the modern Benoni, which is highly risky. Did he expect generosity? Yes, but it was also unexplored relatively, and so it was sort of calculated risks. So here, anyway, d4, d5, and actually, already I want to avoid, the King's Indian defence, because once he totally wiped me out in the King's Indian, spending about 15 minutes on the clock, and my club mates were, Roy was indicating he had beaten one of our top players just a week before, Genghis, and that apparently was in the King's Indian, which I found out later. But yeah, it was noted by my team, he had beaten a good player who was on a run of form. So I didn't want to play the King's Indian. I thought, well, why not repeat the Albin counter gambit? You see, often the second most popular move here is actually knight f3. If you look at chessgames.com, knight f3 is the second most popular move to c4. Now for blitz chess, this is actually a very important thing to make note of, because in blitz chess, if you have this idea of expecting generosity, then gambits are going to be more effective. You can gambit more because you want to put the opponents under pressure, because there'll be greater generosity in blitz chess. So actually, for blitz chess, I would argue c4 is a bit of a risk because you're allowing the Albin counter gambit. Now, although I've played this Albin counter gambit, I'm actually in a kind of negative mood in this game, and this is reflected in subsequent play. So this is just my opinion, though. In blitz chess, it's important for players to play knight f3. It's the most annoying move to stop the Albin counter gambit. You look at chessgames.com, actually the stats are not that bad for black in terms of winning percentage for Albin counter gambit. It's up to 33%, higher than most other choices. So as a blitz weapon, it's ideal, as I've shown in the past quite a lot. but in a longer game it can still be quite dangerous. In this league it's quite a quick time limit, but he's going to be playing a bit more cautiously than our previous encounter. He's not going to be castling routinely, as this game will show. So after knight f3, knight c6, he does play the standard g3, and this is the standard move now, bishop g4, according to ChessGames.com. I haven't done anything that bad yet, but there's another instructive angle on this game I want to sort of introduce in advance. That, you know, he's taken with d takes e5. There's an important idea that I've actually got potentially a virtual semi-open file. If this pawn could be removed, this would be actually a trump card. It would be a semi-open file on e2. That's a very important positional note, you know, if you imagine that pawn off the board. And in terms of celebrating, the idea of celebrating things in chess, like when you celebrate a pin, you don't try and immediately exploit the pin. You try and gain maximum advantage, you know, torturing the opponent with that pin to gain other advantages where you wouldn't have had. That's the nature of celebration. In cooking, you know, chefs, they celebrate ingredients, they bring out ingredients. It's taking those ingredients that are there and making the most out of them, making them as effective as possible. And in chess, you know, you do the same thing. When you have a pin, or even a recapture, I'm thinking a recapture or gaining back your material. Don't just technically gain back your material. Gain it with maximum impact, your material back, or maximum impact for a pin. This is, I think, the idea of celebration, and it's in a lot of chess tactics, the idea of celebration, not just the immediate exploitation. So if this pawn is going to be recaptured later, it should really be done celebrating that recapture, ideally creating that virtual trump card which already exists in the position, the semi-open file pressure. But we'll get to that soon. Okay, so bishop g2. Now, of course, he's weakened the light squares, and of course it seems logical now to play queen d7, but he doesn't. It's not mandatory for him to castle. Interestingly, on ChessGames.com, people generally castle here, but that's a limited database. Maybe there are other options. I think what he played was a high-class waiting move, and it's a very logical move. a3. I can't see it's that bad at all, because white wants to kind of discourage black, first of all, from castling queenside, and it's often used, this a3 b4, and it fianchettos the bishop, puts pressure on d4. Very logical move. However, I thought, surely, okay, even though he hasn't castled, it still might be worth trying to remove that fianchettoed bishop. If you look at some classic games like Kasparov against Topalov, he removed the fianchettoed bishop, and Topalov later castled queenside, if you remember that game. Kasparov was playing white. And, okay, it looked as though Topalov had a good position. He sort of maybe played inaccurately later. But, you know, it's not always bad to remove the fianchettoed bishop, basically, if you take that example, even if the opponent hasn't castled yet. So maybe this is not such a terrible move, bishop h3, in this position. Now, tactically, it's also supported. Now, if he tries to go for the d4 pawn, I think he might be in a little bit of trouble here. Knight takes d4, then I can castle with immediate pressure on d4, and this might not be the most pleasant position, this sort of position. All sorts of nasties might await white here, and he really, it looks to be in trouble. You know, things like rook takes d4, knight and knight f3, looks as though, you know, white's dangerous. So he doesn't want to do that, but he did take, and now he plays b4, so he's inviting positively queen g2. Let's just turn on an engine here, evaluation here. I don't think I've done so badly so far, but it is an advantage to white. So his a3 and b4 are pretty strong. If we just review this position, you know, maybe bishop h3 immediately wasn't the greatest. In fact, maybe slightly more accurate would be just castling and then waiting for white's castle. Okay. So after bishop h3, yeah, white's advantage did increase with him taking, actually. The truth detector, the engine, indicates. So casting a slight improvement. trying to not just get the weak and light squares, but here, and also, I don't know, bishop takes f3 comes on the cards here as an idea. If white hasn't yet played knight bd2, then the recapture would have to be with the bishop. So say bishop takes f3. I mean, this is interesting stuff as well, this position, giving up the light square bishop. There is a lot of pressure in the centre, but still a slight advantage for white. Let's go back anyway. So this may be a bit of a blunder already, actually. Let's correct what I said. I didn't think it was that bad, but maybe it is a blunder. Black should wait a little bit more, perhaps, with casting queenside, because I'm weakening my own light squares actually with this exchange. It's not just the light squares here. It's the light squares in my position which are under fire. Particularly like e4 is a strategic white square in the centre. So anyway, he takes, and b4 is now played. So white is better. I castle anyway, thinking, well, maybe b5 isn't that bad, and he did play it because I get knight a5, and that's kind of nice, I thought. Unfortunately, this is a really powerful move, queen d3, very simple, because actually he does support bishop d2 and to b4, I thought, but funny enough he let me off the hook. I thought I played b6, really actually expecting bishop d2, forcing my knight back, and then bishop b4, and he'll be better here, I thought. Now, engine checking this, let's verify this idea of the difference between what I think and engines think. Bishop d2 does come up as a strong move. And now, does bishop b4? Yes, it does come up as a strong move, bishop b4. So I was right on this occasion. This is what I thought during the game. And it's almost as if white's definitely more than a pawn up, more than the gambit pawn up here. So he sort of let me off the hook with his next move a bit. Knight bd2, a little bit. So I play knight h6, and the evaluation is still, it's better for white. So really, with his king not committed on the king side, yes, he has conned me into a great position. And look at the light square control. These are just beautiful light squares. It was almost as though queen e4 was dangerous, but not especially that. But the light squares generally, he's got beautiful light square control. And if the queen wastes time later, then, and I've now blocked the h pawn as well, so any thoughts of attack will be much slower. I have to move the knight, then move the h pawn. It's just not going to happen anymore. My attack's not going to happen. So for one slip up, I've just got a worse position. I've got no dynamism. He's played some powerful weight moves on the queen side. Maybe he looked up the thing from the previous game, which he nearly did lose, and he just didn't want to face an attack, and I've just done exactly the wrong thing so far. I've given him all the white squares on a plate, and in particular beautiful knights, and beautiful knight on e4. But there is a slight weakness of this last move, this c4. So maybe, although knight e4 looks juicy, it might not have been the best here. It's a juicy knight looking. Well, the engine actually likes it, but I think he might have then misplayed it after, actually, because queen e6 would seem logical anyway. It's probably one of the better moves. Bishop g5, and I think here is the difference, the engine difference between what happened in the game. He took on e7. I think taking on h6 would give him a solid advantage here. In this position, okay, I think he might have slipped up. Bishop h6, bishop e7 is also good. Bishop takes e7. He's still got a big advantage here. I'm a bit passive. I'm not doing much. Okay. Now he castles here. I do the only thing now to try and regain the pawn. There's a plan here of trying to make use of this stuff by putting the rook here, forgetting the h-file attack, just putting the rook on e8 and playing for f6. So that's exactly what I do. c5, and now I get out of the way of the c-file. c takes, and I don't want a huge knight d6 happening, so I'm forced to take with the a pawn. Rook fc1, and he's got a perfectly logical plan now to follow up his c5 break, of just doubling rooks. So I think he's playing really, really well. But the one improvement is now coming up in this game, which is the second kind of thing. I mean, I don't know, a slight mistiming and there's no attack for bishop h3 takes g2, but now a slight inaccuracy here, and I'm even missing my virtual trump card now. I should be celebrating the capture of this pawn and the fact that the knight is a bit of a tactical liability on e4 because of this f6. So f6 is the right move here, and here it comes. Often rook c2. To celebrate the virtual trump card, what would be the best way of the e-file? If I give you that as a test, a positional test, what would you play here in this position? Now this does relate to a GM video to capture as a mistake, but I would say let's put another angle on that, that you really want to celebrate your pins, you want to celebrate your captures and your recaptures, because you want to get maximum benefit from them. You don't want to just technically do them, you want to get as much advantage from every move in chess as possible. So to celebrate captures or recaptures is vital. So what would you play here if I give you 10 seconds starting from now? Remember, you're a pawn down. You really want to get your pawn back, don't you? Okay? You want to celebrate the recapture of the pawn. Now, if you just clinically take the pawn, you know, that's just like, it's like adding carrots to your recipe, but you know, you're getting the crunchiness, but you're not exploiting the crunchiness. You've got to add your ingredients, but get the most from them. The ingredient here, you are able to get this pawn back, but you want to get the most from getting the pawn back. To get the most from this pawn back, you want the semi-open file pressure, which was latent in the position. And here, I have the opportunity to actually almost equalize the game position, which is good for black. It's an achievement for black. But no, I play this poxy move, f takes e5. So I've just related to this GM video to capture his mistake. Really, you know, it's like exploiting a pin immediately instead of celebrating a pin. Here, there's no rush to take this pawn back. So this is the major, if there is any instructive point about this game, this is one of the major things as well. Knight f7 or knight g4 is going to get the pawn back with semi-open file pressure. So knight g4 here, for example, there's, you know, he can't do this because he's going to lose the knight. And given he can't do that, I'm actually going to get, assuming he doesn't play a clinical move like knight d6, let's play he plays a normal human move, I'm going to get a virtually equal position. Actually, that seems to be trapping the queen. No, he doesn't want to do that. That would actually win the queen. So he'd let that pawn go. Let's say he did this. Knight takes e5, and you see the huge difference here. I've got frontal pressure. So it's a huge keenness to recapture immediately instead of celebrating the recapture. But this is the thing with cooking and then with chess. You want to get the absolute maximum from the ingredients you have. There's an ingredient of the position here. It might have been a pin, but here it's a recapture of a pawn. How would you recapture the pawn? Give yourself minus 100 points if you played f takes e5. If you played knight f7 or knight g4, give yourself 100 points. Celebrating things in chess is getting the most out of your ingredients, making them as effective as possible. So I didn't, and now this is again a totally poxy position after f takes e5. I've given him a beautiful knight blockade on e4. I've compounded my earlier mistimed bishop g2, too keen without him castling, giving me no attack. I've compounded that to give him really beautiful knights. I think I was just in a negative mood, maybe not that enthusiastic after being, you know, crushed by Swanson the week before as well. You know, I wasn't expecting generosity, but really this idea of expecting generosity or not, it's independent from celebrating you know, your tactical elements in positional or even your recaptures. You've got to get the most advantage from each and every move in chess, and if you have this possibility of getting back material, not to be so keen to go straight into recapturing material. So knight g4 here is a lot more powerful as a move. I mean, it even causes potential for a queen loss if he did play the disastrous knight d2. He like loses queen. So but no, he plays a normal move, and I might actually, I would have an equal-ish or even slightly better position, which is a miracle with black. But we've got that trump card, that virtual trump card has been emphasized. So there were two major inaccuracies in this game. Okay, now here I'm lucky actually in this position coming up. After rook d7, there's a tactical episode now after knight fg5, but thankfully he put a draw offer on the cards. And as I say, this is the thing, he's better here anyway technically. And the funny thing is, okay, so let's turn this off for a moment. In this position I did have a big think, and I was thinking, he was shorter on time, but he's got a beautiful position. There's nothing at all wrong with position. He's got the perfect light square blockade. I've got no h-file attack or attacking chances. I was thoroughly depressed with this miserable effort that I've done in this game. I can point to only two inaccuracies, major inaccuracies: the super keenness of playing bishop takes g2, and the super keenness of trying to win back the pawn. Those are the two major key inaccuracies, I believe. So actually I did accept a draw, but there is a potential for a huge blunder here. Say g6, he pointed out this: knight takes, queen takes, knight f6, and actually my position might be like falling to bits. After like rook takes c7, it starts to look a bit nasty. If I have to give up my queen g6, this is not very pleasant, and I'd be like totally collapsing. I didn't see that. I just thought he was better with the doubled rooks. So intuitively I thought, well, actually this is not a bad position to agree a draw in. So my opponent was generous in the draw offer, which I accepted. So, and he was suggesting that one of the better moves was rook h8. Let's check this position with an engine to see, am I actually collapsing here? So if I played g6, knight h7 is the engine move. So he had actually seen this tactical line, and it is pretty crushing. This, in fact, instead of rook c7, queen g6 even stronger. I don't really quite understand it. I think maybe, I don't know. Why not rook takes c7? Will it come up with rook takes c7 here? Because that looks so crushing compared to the other one. Oh, it's giving queen f5, that's why. Okay, on queen takes c7, that is a disaster. That's +6. So, but with queen f5, that makes it a bit less worse, but still better for white. So this would have been a very, very unpleasant continuation. So I'm glad I agreed a draw. So just to summarize, if there's any instructive points about this game, well, first of all, I think a dynamic view of chess about getting potentially losing trump cards, playing with risk, is intrinsically linked with expecting generosity. Now, although I did play a gambit in this opening, my psychology was not right for the opening. There was a psychological mismatch that I was in a sort of solid, not risk-taking frame of mind, playing a risky opening. If you play a risky opening, you've got to get the most of your trump cards. There's a virtual trump card with the Albin counter gambit. If you get your pawn back, you should have frontal pressure on the semi-open file for a start. So don't be so keen to play a move like f takes e5 just to get your pawn back. Okay, and also don't be so keen just to exchange off light square bishops. The opponent might not castle routinely. You might not have the h-pawn attack. He's going to wait until you block the h-pawn, and then you'd have no attack. So over keenness to exchange off fianchetto bishops with bishop h3. If I just castled, wait for white's castle. Now, if he does carry on playing the waiting game here, let's just briefly check that again. So say I did castle. it does look as though b4 is discouraging that. But there might be the option, not just of bishop h3, of bishop takes f3 here, because actually c4 is a bit vulnerable. Knight takes. I'm wondering why knight takes c4 is not playable here. It might be one of the better moves, or just h5 here. Knight takes c4 might give white, semi-open c-file pressure. He might castle here and just play later bishop f4 and treat that as a positional pawn sack. So anyway, it's the option of bishop f3 which might make this. It's got more options, this line, but there's other ways of waiting apart from casting queenside. Another waiting move might just be f6. If we play f6 here, but not with the idea maybe of just taking here. So say he plays boar, or maybe taking with the knight to at least remove this knight, or castling. Here, there'll be more frontal pressure on, potential trump cards on f2 and e2. It's the idea of just gaining pressure, trying to gain maximum advantage from everything. So anyway, this is just giving white a beautiful position, with me having no attack once I commit to blocking my own h-pawn. This knight's also a tactical target. Thankfully he didn't exploit it with bishop d2 to b4. So I've just blocked my h-pawn, so I've got no attack. It's a miserable game, but I found later instructive points. I mean, I was actually not very keen even to go over this game because it was just such a miserable effort, it seemed. But when I looked at it with an engine analysis, I thought, well, actually, this was an instructive point, how I tried to get this material back in such a poxy way as I do now with f6, and not realizing that this is my opportunity, my golden opportunity to celebrate the recapture of that pawn. But no, I don't take it, and I'm left with totally miserable position, which I'm glad to accept a draw. Hope you got something from that. Comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.